Rain fell like whispers against the glass. The wide skylights of the Northgate Mall blurred with streaks of water, casting soft gray shadows over polished tile and the bustling foot traffic of early afternoon shoppers. Fluorescent lights hummed above. Mothers pushed strollers. Teenagers loitered near the food court. The world spun as it always did. Ordinary, harmless, predictable. Daniel Rourke sat at a corner table of Java Junction, the mall's quieter coffee shop tucked away beside a bookstore. He sipped black coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard and watched the world through the haze of his own unease. Civilian life, for all its quiet comforts, had never sat right with him. 3 years out of the Corps, and the silence still screamed louder than the war ever had. His shoulders were broad, posture rigid even in rest. The sleeves of his worn field jacket were rolled up just enough to expose faded tattoos, ghost marks of service, of friends lost. A half-finished novel sat beside his cup, The Things They Carried. The irony wasn't lost on him. Across the atrium, he watched a man argue with a kiosk vendor over a defective phone case. A young woman tried on sunglasses in front of a mirror. 2 children chased each other with ice cream cones, laughter echoing. And then it happened. A thunderous crack. Final. Not fireworks. Not construction. A sound Daniel had hoped to leave buried in desert sands and broken memories. Gunfire. Screams erupted instantly. The glass doors at the main entrance shattered inward. Chaos bloomed like a sudden wildfire. People scattered in every direction, ducking, shrieking, collapsing. 2 masked men in tactical gear stormed in, rifles raised, shouting orders in clipped, aggressive tones. Daniel's instincts surged forward before thought could catch up. He dropped to a knee behind the counter, scanning. One attacker headed toward the central plaza. Another moved toward the security post. Radios crackled on their vests. This was no random shooting. This was coordinated. A hostage situation. He saw it play out too fast and too slow, the way combat always does. A mall security guard went for his holster too slow. He dropped before his weapon even cleared the leather. A child sobbed nearby. Somewhere, someone kept screaming. Daniel's fingers curled into fists. His mind flipped a switch. Civvy time was over. A barista crouched behind the espresso machine, shaking. "What do we do?" "Stay down," Daniel murmured, his voice steady, calm, military calm. "Don't make noise, don't run." He slid out of sight, moving low. Between overturned tables and scattered belongings, he edged toward the side service corridor. His brain mapped the mall's layout from memory. He had been here enough to know the exits, the blind spots, the air vents, the back routes used by staff. He wasn't a man looking for a fight anymore, but that didn't matter now. The fight had come for him. And this time, he wasn't running. As the first 20 minutes ticked by, the attackers rounded up survivors. A group of hostages was herded into the central atrium, nearly 50 people. Shoppers, store clerks, a tour group of seniors, 2 toddlers clinging to their mother's legs. One man resisted. A gun cracked again. The floor took his body. Daniel reached the maintenance hallway and ducked into a janitor's closet. Inside, he found a utility vest, gloves, and a screwdriver makeshift tools, but tools nonetheless. His phone buzzed, no signal. The attackers were using a jammer. Smart. Military-level smart. He breathed out. Slow. "You've done this before. Not here. Not with civilians. Not on American soil." But it didn't matter. Out there, a war had started, and he was the only one behind enemy lines. Daniel moved like a shadow through the service corridors, blending with the silence. The mall, once a haven of weekend consumerism, had become a war zone. He passed through the staff hallway behind a row of shuttered stores, listening to the echo of gunfire and the sharp, barked commands from the atrium. The attackers were taking control fast, too fast. He didn't know how many there were yet, but it was at least 5, 2 at the front, 1 near the security booth, and he'd seen 2 more flanking near the east and west wings, through the mall's mirrored columns. Professional, tactical, not thrill seekers. These men were trained. He slipped into the old service elevator behind the toy store and pried open the emergency panel. Wires tangled in chaotic color. His fingers hesitated for only a moment. Then memory took over. Green to red. Cut the alarm loop. Disable the main circuit to stall movement. The elevator jerked once, then froze. Good. That would slow them down. Daniel climbed through the top hatch and descended the maintenance ladder, emerging 2 stories above the atrium in a dusty access duct that overlooked the skylight. He crawled forward. Dust coated his jacket. His breath slowed. Below him, he saw the hostages more clearly now, dozens kneeling under armed watch, ringed in fear. He spotted the leader. Black mask, red armband, tactical radio headset. He moved with command, quick eyes, clipped hand gestures. His voice came sharp and clear. No sudden moves. Comply, and you live. This is not random. This is justice. Justice, Daniel scowled. He saw a teenage boy try to raise his phone. One of the gunmen smashed it to the ground, then kicked him hard in the ribs. The boy crumpled. His mother reached for him and got the butt of a rifle in her jaw. Daniel clenched his teeth. Somewhere nearby, a man was bleeding. Daniel could see the red trailing from a woman's coat. She had tried to bandage someone. He noted her face, composed but frightened. A nurse, maybe. Her calm made her stand out. That woman's going to be important, he told himself. People will look to her soon. Through the duct grate, he listened to the attackers' radio chatter. East wing secured. 10 hostages. 2 resisting, neutralized. South entrance locked. Barricades in place. Police on the perimeter. Command wants a message in 15. Command. So they weren't just some rogue cell. There was a chain of command. Orders. Daniel's thoughts shifted gears. They want something. Ransom? Revenge? A political message? Then he heard it. One of the men spoke on the radio in a language Daniel recognized. Not Arabic, not Russian. It was Serbian. Memories surged back. Kosovo, 2004. He remembered the patches, the sound of that dialect. He remembered the face of a boy they'd pulled from a collapsed house after a raid gone wrong. The man on the radio had the same accent, maybe even the same past. This wasn't just a robbery. This was retribution. Daniel dropped back down and moved into a vacant sporting goods store. It had a gated entrance and, more importantly, a wall of hunting knives, hatchets, and crossbows. The firearms were locked behind a glass case, but the rest was fair game. He smashed the lock with a steel bar and armed himself with a tactical knife, a compact compound bow, and a handful of carbon fiber arrows. Improvised, but deadly in the right hands. And Daniel was more than the right hands. He was the wolf in the cage. He paused by a mannequin, stripped it of a tactical hoodie, and switched out his jacket. The change in clothing made him blend easier. As he moved through the back corridor, he spotted his reflection in a cracked mirror. Same eyes, same weight, but something inside had come alive again. The Marine, the protector. Not out of glory, not for revenge. For the people, for that mother, that kid with the broken phone, that bleeding man, and the nurse who hadn't flinched. He moved again, faster now. Phase 1 was recon. Phase 2, disrupt and disarm. He found a fire alarm panel and popped it open. Disabled. They'd thought of that. But he could rig it manually, cause a distraction. Not yet. He needed to be strategic. Daniel found a lost security badge hanging on a broken lanyard. He clipped it to his belt and ducked through the back hallway toward the power room. There were more of them in the security feed hub. He'd need to knock out their comms soon, maybe overload the PA system, confuse them, scatter their control. His plan began to form. Isolate, distract, divide, neutralize, and above all, don't get caught. He had no backup, no weapon with range, no body armor. Just a bow, a knife, and every lesson war had carved into his bones. The hunt had begun. The mall's security office was built like an afterthought. 2 cramped rooms tucked behind a fake potted plant corridor next to the lost and found. Inside, monitors blinked with shaky CCTV feeds from across the complex. Daniel crouched behind a corner across from the office, watching. Two hostiles, both armed. One was watching the monitors, the other was chatting over the radio, pacing near the door with his rifle slung low, lazy, overconfident, dangerous. Daniel looked down at the screwdriver in his vest pocket. He still had one more move to make before the plan started. He withdrew a small metal ball he'd jerry-rigged from items in the janitor's closet, an aerosol canister, a cracked fire alarm trigger, and some wiring. It wasn't a bomb, just a burst device, loud, bright, meant to disorient. He whispered to himself, "Time to divide the pack." He tossed the device through the open maintenance vent just outside the office. Pop! A burst of white light and a shriek of compressed gas rattled through the hallway. The pacing guards spun around, blind and yelling. The man at the monitors jumped to his feet, knocking over his chair. That was all the time Daniel needed. He surged forward, knife in hand, swift, precise. The first guard never saw him. Daniel's forearm smashed into his throat, silencing the scream. He shoved the man against the wall and dragged him down quietly. The second came running, gun raised, wild-eyed. Daniel ducked, rolled, and rose just behind the man. A single motion, blade up, artery slashed. The body dropped with a wet thud. Two down. He exhaled. No triumph, only momentum. Daniel checked the radios. Still active. He snatched one and scanned channels, listening for chatter. They didn't suspect anything yet, just a malfunction in the south corridor, according to the voice on the other end. Good. That bought him time. He scanned the security feed. Hostages were still in the atrium, now bound in zip ties. The nurse he'd spotted earlier was tending to the wounded man, but two guards stood nearby with rifles, watching. Tension was rising. One misstep and it would spiral. He flipped to another feed. Loading dock. Two more men. One was unloading crates from a truck that had been let into the service bay. Daniel zoomed in. Crates marked with unfamiliar emblems. Weapons. They were arming up for something bigger. This wasn't about money. This was a staging point for a bigger attack, or a message. Daniel felt his stomach twist. How deep does this go? Then he saw it. A laptop on the table near the loading dock, open to a map. A digital countdown ticked in red. 0 hours, 42 minutes, and 17 seconds. 42 minutes. Until what? His mind worked fast. They didn't need hostages for that long if this were just a robbery or ransom op. That countdown meant either a detonation, a broadcast, or both. Whatever it was, it wouldn't end well. He copied the security footage onto a USB stick and disabled the camera feed from that wing. If they checked, they'd think the line had gone dark, routine interference. He moved again. Next target, the loading dock. As he exited the security room, he passed the body of the younger guard. Late 20s, shaky beard, no tattoos. Not a monster, just a misguided follower. Daniel paused for a half-second. Then he dragged both bodies into a janitor closet, locked the door, and kept moving. The halls were quieter now. Most civilians had been herded and secured. That gave the attackers confidence, and made them sloppy. Daniel slipped through a storage hallway into a shuttered women's clothing store. He used the dressing room mirror to check his gear. Blood on his sleeves, faint smudges of dirt and sweat. He looked like he'd just crawled out of a ditch, and somehow he felt alive. He moved to the vent system again, crawling above the walkways. A few feet away, a skylight showed the atrium below. He counted at least 6 more guards there, 2 roaming, 4 stationed around the perimeter. He'd need to draw some away. That's when he saw the perfect lever. The young barista from Java Junction, Maria, according to her name tag, had been pulled from the group. One of the masked men was interrogating her. Loud, aggressive, slapping her cup from her hands, trying to break her. They're looking for someone, Daniel realized. Not money, not fame. Someone. That's why they weren't shouting demands. They were hunting. He moved quickly now. He dropped back to the floor level behind the children's arcade and rigged the emergency fire suppression valve. The overhead sprinklers activated, flooding the air with mist and confusion. Instant chaos. Screams, Curses, shouts through the radios. 2 guards from the atrium peeled off to check the hallway. Perfect. Daniel drew his knife again, waited behind a shuttered candy kiosk, and struck as they came around the corner. The first one never saw it coming. Throat, ribs, down. The second raised his weapon, but Daniel disarmed him with a clean twist and broke his nose with a headbutt. Then silence. Daniel breathed heavily and checked his watch. 36 minutes left on the clock. Now the wolves knew they weren't alone. He snatched the radio and keyed it once, just enough for the attackers to hear breathing but no words. Then he whispered into the void, "You brought this to the wrong place." The message had been sent, not with words, not with bravado, but with action. 2 more of their own gone without a trace, and a whisper over the radio to haunt the silence. Now the attackers were on edge. Daniel could hear it in their voices, shorter commands, overlapping chatter, footsteps too fast, too heavy. Fear was creeping in. That's how empires fall. Not from power, from panic. Daniel made his way toward the loading dock. The corridor leading there smelled of oil and steel, faint exhaust lingering from the truck now parked inside. Overhead, fluorescent lights flickered. The air felt heavier here, more claustrophobic, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. He crouched near a stack of overturned cleaning carts and peered into the loading bay. 3 hostiles, one by the laptop, one pacing near the truck, one sitting, nervously clicking the safety on his weapon. Amateurs, all 3, not like the team in the atrium. These were foot soldiers, rented muscle, likely drawn in by money or ideology, not skill. Daniel spotted the laptop again, still running, still counting down. 0:27:49. He couldn't risk them closing that screen. He needed it intact. Take them out fast, quiet, no margin for error. He reached for a fire extinguisher mounted nearby, ripped it from the wall, and crept toward the sitting man first. 3 quick steps, a violent arc. The metal cylinder crushed the side of the man's skull before he could turn his head. Daniel caught the rifle as it slipped from limp fingers. The second man turned too late. Daniel stepped in and swept his legs out, then drove his elbow into the attacker's throat. The man choked on his own breath, clawing at his neck. A second hit silenced him. The third guard, the one at the laptop, reached for his sidearm. Too late. Daniel threw the fire extinguisher across the space, catching the man square in the face. He dropped like a felled tree. All 3 down, no gunshots, no alarms. Daniel pulled the laptop close and read the open file. A satellite uplink interface, encrypted, a map of the eastern seaboard, live tracking nodes, and that countdown, set to send a signal at 0. Then it clicked. This was a broadcast, a live feed, timed for a political message or mass media event, probably terror propaganda. The mall attack was just the spark. The real plan was to stream it, to shock the world. He copied the entire hard drive to the USB he carried. There wasn't time to decode it now, but this was proof. With it, authorities could trace funding, coordination, even uncover sleeper cells. He rigged a quick bypass in the upload code, redirecting the target IP to a dead node, nulling the transmission without shutting down the system outright. A clever operator might spot the reroute in time, but he guessed they'd be too distracted soon. Then he heard boots. 4, maybe 5 pairs, approaching from the far hallway. Too many to fight, no cover in the open. Daniel dove beneath the parked truck, crawling until he reached the rear axle. The boots stopped just inside the bay. "He's here," one of them said. "I smell blood." Another replied, "Too clean for a mall cop. This one's military." Daniel stilled his breath. "I want him alive," said a voice colder than the others. That voice, calm, smooth, with just a trace of a Balkan accent. The leader, "I want to look into his eyes before I break him." Daniel's muscles tensed. He memorized the voice, the cadence. That was the man responsible. They checked the room briefly, then left, but not before the leader whispered something into the comms. "Keep the hostages quiet. Kill one if they resist. It's time they understood we're not here to play games. Daniel's heart pounded. He couldn't afford to let them start executions. The time for stalking was ending. It was time to send a message of his own. North Atrium, 10 minutes later. From the second-floor balcony above the food court, Daniel aimed the compound bow at the skylight. He had 2 arrows ready, one tipped with a glass-breaking head, the other with a steel rod he'd welded to punch through Kevlar. He steadied his breath, focused. Below, the guards stood bored. One was eating trail mix. Another had his rifle slung too low. He released the first arrow. Crash. The skylight shattered. Screams erupted. The guards looked up, distracted. Daniel fired the second arrow. Thwack. It embedded in a guard's throat. The man spun and collapsed, twitching. Chaos exploded. Daniel was already on the move, sprinting down the back stairs, drawing the stolen rifle. A flashbang he'd taken from the fallen enemy lit up the corridor with a thunderclap. He burst through the atrium's side door. Shots fired wild. He rolled behind a kiosk. One of the terrorists tried to grab a hostage as cover. Daniel popped up, fired a single shot, headshot, clean. Another spun, and Daniel dropped him too. 3 hostages ran for cover. The rest hit the ground. Only one attacker remained now, close to the nurse. He dragged her to her feet and pressed a pistol to her temple. "Drop it!" he screamed. "I swear I will kill her." Daniel stared down the rifle barrel. The woman met his eyes. No fear, just quiet trust. He saw the angle. The man had exposed half his shoulder. Daniel shifted slightly. One breath, one shot. Crack. The bullet tore through the attacker's deltoid, spinning him sideways. The nurse wrenched herself free. Daniel surged forward, tackled the man, and smashed the butt of the rifle into his temple. Silence. It was over. For now, the atrium was under his control. 7 hostiles down. The hostages sobbed, cried, huddled. And the nurse looked up at him. "Who are you?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the group. "I need your help. We're not safe yet. There's more of them. But if you listen, if you stay calm, we can survive this." The group stared at him, stunned, unsure. Then someone whispered, "You're one of them, aren't you?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I'm just the guy who happened to be here when no one else was." The mall had gone still again. The sounds of chaos faded into a tense, eerie silence. The scent of blood, smoke, and ozone lingered like a fog hanging over the ruined atrium. Bodies lay in broken poses. Shell casings glittered beneath flickering light fixtures. Somewhere, a fire alarm buzzed half-heartedly, ignored by everyone. Daniel crouched behind a shattered display case, rifle angled low, breath even. He was no longer just a survivor. He had become something more. A symbol to the people huddled behind food counters, beneath benches, pressed against the walls. He was the edge of resistance. But he wasn't alone anymore. The game had changed. "Nice shot," a voice said, cool and disembodied. "Through the glass. Very cinematic." It echoed from the ceiling speakers. Mall-wide PA system. They'd patched in. "I've read your file, Rourke. Sergeant. Recon. Fallujah. Kandahar. Kosovo." Daniel tensed. The voice was calm, precise, intimate, like a surgeon before an incision. "I studied men like you. I became men like you. But you know what always happens to heroes in the real world? They die quietly, and no one remembers their names." Daniel scanned the ceiling. No visible speakers to shoot. The voice had omnipresence now. Psychological warfare. "You're interfering with history. This moment is meant to awaken the world. You are delaying evolution. That makes you expendable." Daniel keyed the attacker's own stolen radio. "Then come finish the job." Silence for a moment. Then soft laughter. "Oh, I will. But not yet. First, I'll give you a gift." The sound of something heavy scraping filled the atrium. From the shadows of a side hallway, 2 hostages were pushed forward, hands zip-tied, mouths taped, blood on their shirts. A third body, already dead, was dragged and dropped behind them like garbage. Daniel saw it was the boy from earlier, the one who tried to use his phone. Murdered for defiance. You couldn't protect him, the voice said. You won't protect the others either. They are lambs. You are a wolf in a burning barn. Noble, but doomed. Daniel clenched his fists. The two surviving hostages were shoved to the center of the atrium. Behind them stood a new attacker, taller, more heavily armed than the others. Black combat armor, full face shield, not talkative. Daniel moved low, switching positions. He whispered to the nurse, Claire, as he now knew her name. Take 10 people. Go through the kitchen behind the taco stand. There's a service tunnel. Lead them quietly. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, keep going. Claire's eyes widened. But what about? I'll slow them down. Just get the civilians clear. She nodded. No argument, just action. Daniel returned to the atrium perimeter and waited for the armored figure to expose a weak point. The attacker pushed one hostage down and raised a pistol to the other. Daniel fired. The shot hit the wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Then the armored attacker turned, faster than expected, and fired back. Rounds ricocheted around Daniel's cover. Wood splinters. Glass bursts. He rolled, grabbed a second rifle from a fallen enemy, and flanked hard left. The armored man advanced, covering the hostages as he moved. He's not like the others, Daniel realized. This one's ex-military, trained, controlled. Daniel ducked behind a kiosk, yanked a firecracker from his vest, and lobbed it past the attacker. Pop, pop, pop. A string of loud snaps and white flashes. It wasn't a flashbang, but it broke the attacker's rhythm. Daniel closed the distance, diving over the barrier, tackling him into a row of massage chairs. The two men tumbled to the ground, grappling. Fists, elbows. The rifle was knocked away. A knee to Daniel's ribs, a punch to the armored helmet. The attacker reached for a sidearm. Daniel slammed his forearm into the elbow joint and twisted hard. Bone cracked. The pistol fell. Daniel tore off the man's helmet. The face beneath was young, barely 30, cold, disciplined, a jagged scar across one eyebrow. They stared at each other for a beat too long. Then Daniel struck. A headbutt, a chokehold, then nothing but limp silence. He stood, bruised and bleeding, and looked back at the hostages. The two survivors ran to him. One sobbed uncontrollably. The other just said, "Thank you." Daniel checked the radio. The voice returned. "Well done, soldier. You killed Pitar. He trained under me. You'd have liked him. Maybe in another life." Daniel didn't respond. He just stared at the speaker above. "I see you've made friends. I see the nurse is helping you." Daniel's eyes sharpened. He's watching us somehow. Drones, cameras, still active security feeds. "Let's play a game, Rourke. I'll give you 20 minutes. After that, if I find another group of hostages, I'll kill 2. For every 20 minutes you resist, the price doubles." Daniel looked down at the body of the young boy, the one he failed to save. Not again. He turned to Claire, who was now guiding civilians through the corridor. "Get them moving. Quietly. Fast." "What about you?" she asked. Daniel picked up the attacker's earpiece and said into the mic, "I'm coming for you." The voice answered, softly. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." The service corridor behind the bakery smelled of yeast and sweat, ovens long cold and trays of dough abandoned mid-rise. Claire had gotten 20 people through the tunnel safely. That was 20 lives pulled back from the brink. But Daniel didn't feel relief. Not yet. Not while that voice still echoed in the air. Not while the countdown still ticked toward whatever nightmare these men had planned. He moved fast, checking corners, climbing 2 levels up to the closed-off administrative wing, where the mall's operations center was housed. He needed to find the control room. Needed to end the voice. A single static beep sounded in his ear. Then, 18 minutes left, Sergeant." Daniel didn't reply. He pried open a panel on the wall and ducked into the old maintenance crawl space above the HVAC system. Narrow, hot, suffocating. He crawled forward on raw elbows and knees until he reached the vent grate above the operations room. And there he saw him. The leader. No mask now, just a man. Late 40s, salt and pepper beard trimmed close, calm blue eyes, clean cut, like an old professor or a retired officer. He moved between monitors with unnerving poise. Daniel recognized him instantly. Major Stefan Kovac, Serbian Special Forces, disavowed after the Balkan Wars, disappeared, rumored dead. But Daniel remembered his face from a mission gone wrong in 2004, when U.S. troops stormed a compound and found nothing but burned tapes and twisted corpses. Kovac had been on a kill list then. Now he was here, alive, broadcasting terror from an American shopping mall. Kovac turned toward the room's only other occupant, a frightened technician hunched over a computer. "Uplink is failing," the tech stammered. "There's a breach in the redirect. Someone's hijacked the signal." Daniel smiled slightly. "That was me." Kovac didn't flinch. "Fix it, or I will feed your spine to the floor tiles." The man scrambled faster. Daniel checked his gear. Only a few rounds left. One smoke grenade. One last arrow in his rigged quiver. The rifle was slung low, his combat knife pressed against his thigh. He tapped the vent cover once, twice, then kicked it clean out. It crashed onto the conference table with a loud metallic clang. Kovac looked up calmly as Daniel dropped down behind him. The technician bolted. Kovac didn't move. Daniel raised his rifle. "It's over." Kovac tilted his head. "That's where you're wrong." The screens around them flashed. Footage of the mall, of Daniel saving hostages, of Claire helping others to safety, of bodies. "You made this bigger than I ever could," Kovac said. "You became the story." Daniel stepped closer. "This ends now." Kovac slowly raised his hands. "Then pull the trigger." For a moment, Daniel's finger tightened, but something in Kovac's smile held him back. "Why aren't you reaching for a weapon?" Daniel asked. "I don't need to. You won't kill me in front of a camera." Daniel looked at the feed. He hadn't realized it, but the security cam in the corner was still active, blinking red. Kovac went on, "You're the hero. And heroes don't execute, not even monsters." Daniel hesitated. And that's when the floor behind him exploded. A concussion charge rigged to the wiring under the baseboards. Daniel was thrown forward, crashing into the monitors. Sparks flew, glass shattered, pain burst across his back. Kovac moved fast, faster than a man his age should. He kicked Daniel's rifle away and drew a small knife from his boot, slashed downward. Daniel rolled, caught the wrist mid-strike, twisted. Kovac snarled, then punched him hard in the jaw. They fought in close quarters, scraping, slamming into file cabinets, breaking desks. It was brutal, silent, no wasted motion. Then Daniel headbutted Kovac squarely, felt the crack of bone. Blood sprayed. Daniel landed 2 more punches to the ribs, and Kovac dropped the knife. But then, alarm klaxons began to wail. Red lights flooded the room. The tech had triggered the final override before fleeing. The countdown resumed, now at 0, 4, 26. Daniel grabbed Kovac by the collar and threw him into the main console. Sparks flew. Wires popped. The backup generator kicked in. "This wasn't just about the mall, was it?" Daniel growled. Kovac chuckled through broken teeth. "Of course not. You think I'd burn all this just for one building? Look at the map." Daniel turned. On the screen was a cluster of blinking targets. 7 malls across the country, all synced to the same network. Kovac hissed, "I'm just one arm of the body. Kill me," and another grows back. Daniel stared at the map, each location flashing red. You can't stop them all. But he could stop this one. He shoved Kovac to the floor and typed furiously. Accessed the override pathway from earlier. Fed the corrupted uplink code into the root of the server. Began cascading shutdown of the local node. Kovac lunged for him. Daniel turned, too slow. But Claire appeared at the doorway, blood on her hands but alive. She raised a pistol and fired once. The bullet struck Kovac in the shoulder. He dropped. Daniel finished the sequence. One keystroke. Ling der Lu Miao. Wu. Si. Then, uplink failure. Broadcast terminated. The screen went dark. The voice was gone. Kovac slumped in defeat. Daniel sat back, breathing hard. Claire stood over them both, pistol shaking. Daniel looked up at her. You followed? She nodded. They were chasing some of us. I broke off. Thought you'd need backup. He smiled, tired, grateful. Kovac coughed blood. You think this ends me? I've lit the fuse. Daniel knelt beside him. No, he said coldly. You just got silenced. Then he hit him across the face with the butt of the pistol, hard enough to end the conversation. Rain pounded the mall's glass dome like a war drum. The storm outside had thickened, turning daylight into a silvery twilight. Red and blue lights from police cruisers painted the parking lot in strobing chaos. Helicopters roared overhead. Sirens howled from every direction. Inside, Daniel Rourke walked the blood-slicked corridor like a ghost, rifle slung low, bruised ribs screaming, but standing. Beside him, Claire moved with equal resolve, her jaw set, pistol trembling only slightly in her hands. Behind them trailed a group of survivors, those Claire had led through the food court tunnels, and those Daniel had shielded in the atrium. Some limped, some wept, all were alive. And that was what mattered. Until the radios crackled. This is SWAT command. Repeat, this is SWAT. We have breach authorization. Who's inside? Daniel keyed the mic. Sergeant Daniel Rourke, civilian now. Engaged hostiles. Cleared atrium and loading bay. Took control of the broadcast center. There was a pause. Rourke, confirm your ID. You're listed as inactive. I was. Today, I reactivated myself. Copy that. Stand by for extraction. Daniel looked over the ruined mall, the overturned food stands, the bullet holes, the soaked carpet littered with shell casings. But then Claire's voice brought him back. Where's Kovac? Daniel turned to the hall behind them. Still alive. I zip-tied him to a pipe in the sub-basement, bleeding, ranting. Claire nodded slowly, but her eyes were uncertain. You think he's done? Daniel shook his head. And at that moment, the mall's power flickered. Once, twice, and the floor vibrated beneath their feet. Boom. A low, heavy sound from below. Boom. Another, louder. Then a sharp crack split the air, and smoke hissed from the ventilation grates. Daniel raised his rifle. Move, now. He led the group down the main concourse, as another explosion rocked the floor beneath the eastern wing. Fire licked the walls from the underground maintenance access. A pipe burst behind them, flooding the corridor with steam. He grabbed the radio again. Command, the building's compromised. I repeat, secondary charges have been planted. Multiple. Structural. We're extracting now. Copy. Fire teams en route. Evac at south exit. Daniel and Claire herded the civilians through the broken gates, pushing aside overturned carts and debris. A child tripped. Claire scooped her up without missing a beat. A father stumbled and Daniel caught him. Another explosion roared from the lower food court. The floor split just feet behind them. Kovac. Even tied, even bleeding, the bastard had triggered his final act. Daniel sprinted, shoving open the emergency fire doors just as the last survivors cleared the passage. The group poured into the rainy parking lot. Emergency lights glared across their faces. Medics rushed in. Police raised weapons, then lowered them at the sight of Daniel's bloodied, battle-worn face. SWAT officers moved past them in waves. Inside's rigged, Daniel barked. Secondary bombs. Basement level. One commander raised a hand. We've got it. Go. You're done, soldier. But Daniel wasn't moving. He turned to Claire. I'm going back in. No, she said. You're not. He'll die down there. Let him. Daniel looked back at the building, now pulsing with smoke and heat. Men like him don't die easy, he said. They make sure someone else does first. Claire grabbed his arm. Then let me go. You've done enough. He looked into her eyes, saw the fire there, but he shook his head. This ends with me. Then he turned and disappeared into the crumbling mall. Sub-basement. 8 minutes later. Daniel moved through the smoke and leaking sprinkler systems, coughing, stumbling through steam. The ceiling above groaned. Somewhere, something sparked. He followed the wire trail, black cord snaking like a serpent, until he reached the spot. Kovac was gone. The zip ties were severed. Blood trailed across the floor, and taped to the pillar, in Kovac's place, was a plastic-wrapped box with a countdown. 0.1分42秒. Daniel's heart pounded. He dropped to a knee, ripped the casing open. Wires, circuit board. The design wasn't military grade, but it was deadly. Enough C4 to collapse the entire east wing. He scanned the detonator. Crude. Then his eyes found the line leading to a motion sensor triggered if the bomb were moved. Too late to relocate it. No time for elegance. He cut the main voltage line. Timer jumped to 0:22. Damn it. He took a breath. Cut the red wire. Silence. The screen flashed once, then stopped. 0.1秒. Daniel collapsed to the floor, heart racing. Cold sweat poured from his skin. The voice returned, this time not from a speaker, from the darkness behind him. Well done, Sergeant. Kovac, leaning against a pipe, weak but smiling, a pistol in his hand. I wanted to see if you'd die like a man or a martyr. Daniel rose slowly, staring down the barrel. You don't get to watch anything else, he said. He drew the small sidearm he'd hidden at the small of his back. Fired. Kovac dropped. Dead this time. No speeches, no detonators, no more games. Just silence. Daniel stepped into the smoke one last time and walked away. 3 days later, the American flag outside Northgate Mall flew at half-mast, flapping gently in the late morning wind. What was once a place of noise, of sale signs and overplayed holiday music, now stood cordoned off behind steel barriers and yellow police tape, scorched glass, blasted pillars, graffiti from the crowd that had gathered in vigil, candles, photos, notes. Thank you to our protector. We survived because of you. For the boy who didn't make it. Reporters swarmed the parking lot like flies on the edge of a battlefield. News, trucks, flashbulbs, microphones hunting for sound bites. They knew Daniel's name now, leaked by someone, somewhere. Decorated Marine, hero of Northgate. Some called him a vigilante, some called him a ghost. But Daniel didn't hear any of it. He stood alone at the far end of the parking lot, dressed in the same tattered field jacket, bruised ribs bound beneath it. His face was lined with fatigue, but his eyes were clear. Claire found him there. She approached quietly, hands in her coat pockets, eyes searching his. You disappeared from the hospital, she said. He nodded. Didn't like the food. You had a collapsed lung. It's uncollapsed now. She smiled faintly, then lost it again. They're holding a press conference. You should be there. Daniel glanced toward the flashing lights and the row of stiff police officers waiting by the podium. Not my kind of crowd. Claire stepped closer. You saved 37 people, Daniel. He looked at her, voice low. I didn't save all of them. Her gaze softened. None of us could have. But without you, it would have been dozens more. He said nothing, just watched the rain begin to fall again. Light this time, soft. They want to give you a medal, she added. The mayor, the governor, even. I've got enough metal in me already. Claire nodded. She understood. They stood together in silence. Then she asked, what happens now? Daniel took a breath. Kovac's network didn't die with him. There are others. 7 malls were targeted. 6 were stopped in time, thanks to what we pulled from that laptop. But whoever was pulling the strings, he wasn't the end. Just a flare. So, you're going back? He shook his head. I'm not wearing a uniform again. Then what? He finally looked her in the eye. I don't know. Maybe I start watching the world a little closer. quietly from the shadows. Claire reached into her coat and handed him something small, her nurse's pin. Silver. Clean. She placed it in his hand. "Not all guardians hide," she said. Daniel nodded slowly, pocketing the pin like a relic. He stepped forward, closer to the fence, and looked at the mall one last time. Burned. Scarred. Still standing. Like him, he turned to leave, heading not toward the cameras, but away, toward the quiet street where his old motorcycle still waited under a rain-soaked tarp. He kicked it to life, pulled on his helmet, and vanished into the fog. Later that night, a flash drive arrived anonymously at the FBI's cyber division. No return address, no note, just a blank casing and a digital fingerprint, Daniel's old military ID. Inside were terabytes of intercepted files, Kovacs network charts, the corrupted uplink path, and something more. A name, a face, someone higher, someone still out there. The case was reopened, quietly, behind closed doors. And somewhere, in the gray corners of the world, a man with bruised ribs and quiet footsteps kept walking, not because he was hunting, but because they still were.